How is Devontae Adams shaking things up for Garrett Wilson in New York? Which NFC South receiver is going to continue his 2024 dominance? And is the Chiefs' backfield situation still a little bit unsettled? Plus, the Fantasy Pros Championship Week 6 second place team owner Larry Dunn hangs out with me tonight to talk Juju Smith-Schuster, Jerry Jeudy, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Larry Dunn is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and jferrellelliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and jferrellelliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you, Rob. Greetings and salutations to all of you Balkaholics and Ferrelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, myffpc.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My usual co-host and the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, jferrellelliott, has the night off. But coming up on tonight's show, we're going to discuss the Colts backfield. A lot of moving pieces there, and maybe moving pieces in Jonathan Taylor's ankle and Trey Sermon's shoulder. I think it's a shoulder. We'll have to look up that before we get back to you on that. How Russell Wilson may or may not change the Pittsburgh Steelers offense will also be a topic of conversation. And Fantasy Pros Championship Week 6, second place overall team owner Larry Dunn will talk about the Steelers backfield, the Texans wideouts without Nico Collins, and a ton more. If you want to connect with us on X, you can locate me at Eric Balkman. That's EricBalkman. The show is at hsffhour, and always check out the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at kffsc.com. Facebook.com/hsffhour is where to leave your messages, your questions, your quandaries, your quibbles, complaints there. You can also email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you do have any questions for us, for Larry, now is the time to send them. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, X posts, and emails in our fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend Bryce for helping us out tonight, and our producer and mutual friend Rob. I want to let everybody know, if you're looking for some more fantasy football fun, check out the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There's no draft or salary cap. You choose 10 or 12 players, depending upon if you want to play with kickers and defenses, and just watch them ride through the weekend's games. Remember, only one player per NFL team. There is no stacking. If you want Kyler Murray, you can't have Marvin Harrison. If you want Jalen Hurts, you can't have A.J. Brown. $35 or $200 to enter. You can win up to $2,500 as well in 10, 30, or 100 team contests. Classic format, slim format, with or without kickers and defenses, whatever you want to do. If you want to play, go to myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on it, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live. A lot of shows going on this week. You're probably sick of me by now, which I totally understand, but we got more shows on the hopper. I'll tell you more about that before we sign off tonight. Right now, I want to bring in tonight's guest co-host. He's already a multi-league winner in the FFPC and Fantasy Pros Championship, winning titles in both the FPC and the main event. He sits in second place overall as we head into Week 7 of the Fantasy Pros Championship, as he is right up there chasing that $1 million grand prize. Please welcome into the show my co-host for this evening, Mr. Larry Dunn. Larry, how's it going, dude?
It's great. It's great. How you doing today?
Doing excellent. What's it like? Because I've never been in this position. Like I've done it in the KFFSC where I've been up there at first place late in the season. But man, being in second place, in the Fantasy Pros Championship, where, I mean, it's for $1 million and you're in second place right now. What's that feel like?
You know, I haven't been there either. I've always had good, solid teams that I grinded into the playoffs, and then maybe I got a winner here or there. But I've never had a team that was, pretty high quality, up in one or two. Mm-hmm. It's funny, but I'm definitely it's kind of fun because I've seen this before on your show, and I've like, oh, what the hell do they care? It's only the 6th week or the 5th week, but it is kind of fun when you're there. And Actually, and I had an interesting sweat, because I have Garrett Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
and I was 1.4 points behind with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. First place, he gets that touchdown, right? He gets hit, and I'm like, oh, he's not coming back. He's got a concussion. I'm done. But then they come back, and he comes on, to have a whole quarter, and I got a bagel for the rest of the game. But I'm still happy to be in first place, and in second place. And I was worried because when you invited me last week, I was at third place, and I was like, oh shit, I'm going to have like 100-point week, and I'm going to be down to number 100. But luckily, I had a decent week last week. But it's fun.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like I always say this, like I've had people say, like, where I've booked guests before and they don't want to come on, like, because, well, let's just see how my team is doing in a week or two or whatever. And I get that, but like, even 6 weeks of play, second place overall among 16,000 teams. Yeah, you don't get paid for that in week 6, but that's still a huge accomplishment, Larry.
Yeah, and also a lot of Sunday. I was running first a lot of Sunday also.
Yes. Yeah.
I was going back this weekend. Last week, I was going back and forth. I just have to stack like 2 or 3 more good weeks, and then I can afford a couple of bad week or two.
Right, exactly. And then that's the way to look at it too.
Yeah.
So we are going to be talking fantasy football tonight. A ton of stuff going on. We have waivers being processed coming up later tonight in the FFPC. We have football tomorrow between the Denver Broncos and New Orleans Saints. We're going to get to all that. Before we start, Larry, I do want to ask you, when you are not perusing and hanging around the mountaintop of the FantasyPros Championship, what are you doing for a living?
So right now, I'm actually a CFO of a company that we basically source engineering talent from South America for U.S. companies.
Oh my! This is heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty good. They work for us, and then we basically manage them and do all their benefits and everything. But they work for U.S. companies, so we have teams as much as 25 different engineers at companies. And it's been very interesting. It's kind of, it was a startup that's now in its 6th year that's doing pretty well.
Wow, congratulations. That's awesome to hear. And it could be an awesome week for you, or awesome year for you in fantasy football too. Now I see the t-shirt. Are you a Niners fan? I know you're out in California.
Yeah,
right?
I'm actually a big Niner fan. I've been living in San Francisco now for 7-8 years. Big Niner fan. Try not to be a homer when I'm drafting, but I ended up with 2 Kittles, 2 Debos, an Ayuk, and a lot of Jake Moody and two Purdy backups.
And it's been a weird year for the Niners because they've obviously been bit by the injury bug. But how good they have been and how resilient they've been this year, especially, from a fantasy standpoint too. Like Deebo Samuel's had some blow up games. Kittle obviously has had some blow up games. Before he got hurt, Jordan Mason was leading the NFL in rushing. I should lead off with that. Is Mason going to play this week, in your opinion, Larry?
I have 2 Masons also. That's where I kind of screwed up a little bit. I knew early on because I go to training camps. I'm a pretty avid fan, so I knew Mason was moving up, and you just couldn't Mitchell. You couldn't depend on him. He just always get injured. I got 2 of them. I don't know if he's playing. I haven't gotten any sort of indication from being kind of someone who follows it closely whether or not he's playing. But I'm luckily in my 2 teams, I have some backups. I've got Garindo on a couple, and I just went for a couple of Patrick Taylors. I don't know if I got them, but I could talk about it now because we're after 7 o'clock.
Exactly. Yeah. And I noticed I'm just checking a couple of my dynasty moves in one of my private dynasty leagues that I'm in. And I did pick up Patrick Taylor on the cheap, and we'll see what happens there. Do I have that on the rundown? Are we talking about Garindo and Taylor?
No.
Okay, then let's talk about it now. Because last week on Thursday Night Football against the Seahawks, Mason goes down early. Garindo does have the 99-yard night, but 76 was on 1 carry, and Patrick Taylor was still involved as well. I think Patrick Taylor had 2 or 3 catches, and Garindo wasn't even targeted. So how did you handle it tonight on the waiver wire? Were you more in on Garindo, or was he pretty much taken in most of your leagues?
Well, it was only a 1-week play, maybe 2 weeks. I'm not that concerned long term if McCaffrey's coming back, and then I don't think Mason's probably going to stay injured. So I think I had 1 team where I maybe needed a little backup, so I went for Patrick Taylor because there is no Garindo. I already had 2 of him, and he wasn't available. I actually, in week 1, I drafted a bunch of Patrick Taylor because I wasn't convinced that Garindo was going to be the guy. And everyone thought, oh, it's automatically Garindo because everyone gets rookie fever, early on. And like you, I'm a Badger. I'm going to tell you, I'm a Badger. I went to Wisconsin.
Got it
Yeah,
on right.
I was going to wear my Badger shirt, but then I switched it to the 49. I didn't want to be too much of an ass kisser by wearing the Badger.
Right, yeah, no, I get it. That's totally cool. Niners are fun. My uncle has lived out. He's from Milwaukee, and he moved out, and he worked for Microsoft for many, many years. So he's lived in the Bay Area since, I don't know, the 70s. And for years, for Christmas gifts, I always got Niners gear. I think my first jersey ever was a Joe Montana 16 Niners jersey. So I have a ton of Niners stuff. Like until because obviously I'm a big Packers fan. I'm a season ticket holder. But growing up, I always feel like the Niners were my second team. And it was awesome. I do one of my favorite memories, and I know this isn't fantasy football, but one of my favorite memories growing up was watching John Taylor catch that ball against the Bengals in the Super Bowl with whatever it was, 30 seconds left in the game. It's one of those moments that's frozen in my mind. So in that moment, I was a Niners fan. So I as much as painful as it's been watching the Niners take out the Packers numerous times in the playoffs, they still hold a special spot in my heart for sure.
But I think I want Mason to play. I got Mason on 2 teams.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't play, I think it's going to be a split backfield. I don't think Garindo. Shanahan, it takes a while to gain confidence with Shanahan. And he doesn't know either one of these players very well. Patrick Taylor came from your Packers, right?
Yes, he did. Yes.
So he doesn't know him that well, but at least he's been around a couple of years. And Garindo, he's got the physical traits, but he didn't have a lot of college experience even.
Right.
So, let's just hope it's Mason, but if not, I think it's a shared backfield, and I would only play either one of them if I really, didn't have any other alternatives that I thought I could get 8 to 10 points with.
I think my whole thing with Garindo and Taylor, Garindo, I had already had him on a few of my teams. Taylor, I'm just grabbing just because I was surprised how much they did use him last week. And I was like, okay, let's see what happens here. And Taylor might just be dropped off my teams after week 7, especially if Mason comes back, and obviously McCaffrey hopefully coming back in 2 or 3 weeks as well. We'll see what happens there.
What's funny, I'm a 49er fan, but with all my Masons, I'm like, I don't really know if I want McCaffrey to come back too soon.
Rest McCaffrey. Yeah, save him for the playoffs. There's no reason. Run Mason in the regular season. I'm totally with you. I think I have more Jordan Mason than Christian McCaffrey this year, so I'm fine with that as well.
And Mason's side, he's a good back. He's not McCaffrey, but he's a very solid good back.
I want to bring up a YouTube comment right now, and this is from Permar99, who has a question about Patrick Taylor or Dearness Johnson. Which one would you rather grab on waivers this week or Fab or whatever? And it seems like Permar can still bid on play. I know the KFFSC tonight, you can bid all the way up till midnight Eastern time. So he's thinking Taylor or Dearness Johnson. I actually bid more, about 3 times as much on Dearness Johnson than I did in Patrick Taylor, but it wasn't massive bids. I mean, we're talking about, 4 or 5% of my fab were, $40-50 for Dearness Johnson, as opposed to $3 or $4 for Patrick Taylor. That's the way I went. How would you go with this?
That's exactly. Actually, I did a lot more Dearness. I think he's a pretty solid player. And then I was probably bidding like you $30 to $40.
Mm-hmm.
And then my contingent was Patrick Taylor at $19.
Yeah.
So if I don't get, that was kind of how I was playing that. Just I was more interested in Dearness because if ETN's out and he's hurt for a while, we don't know how long. Even. I like Dearness. I think he's a solid player. He's
a guy, again, he's like an injury away type guy now. So
totally.
If Bigsby goes down, then Johnson's the guy. And Johnson, because of my mismanagement of my running backs on a few of my teams, I might have to start Dearness Johnson this week as a flex, which would be really, or as a second running back, which would be really awful, but we'll see what happens there for sure. Let's talk about the big trade, one of the big trades. We saw 3 trades in the NFL yesterday. Let's talk about the one between the Raiders and the Jets. Devontae Adams goes to New York from Las Vegas. I look at your second place team in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Your first round pick was indeed Garrett Wilson there, Larry. Now, when you look at the relationship and the previous experience that Adams has had with Aaron Rodgers, how concerned are you about Adams coming to New York now? I know you're not benching Wilson. You're still going to be playing him. But how is this going to play out as from a fantasy perspective between the targets of Wilson and Adams?
It's probably, it's red alarm fire to me. Of course, I'm playing Wilson. All of a sudden, he played so well last night. He had the big target game last week with the 22 targets. It wasn't necessarily a great game, but he was playing beautifully. He was playing beautifully on Monday night. And I was like, okay, this is it. This guy is now ready to go and because I think he has the talent. I don't see many NFL receivers have more talent than him, but I'm real concerned. Now I think I went from a potential high-end number one to a solid number two at best, which I'll take it, but I was not happy to see that trade. When I saw it went down, I was getting real happy when the rumors were that, he might stay at the Raiders like a couple of days ago. Yeah, not happy, but I could,
But still, I mean, like a top 15 receiver or a top 16 receiver, whatever, there's still value here.
Yes,
and he can still be a huge difference maker down the stretch. Maybe not as huge as you wanted, but we just got to roll with the punches here. And Garrett Wilson is clearly not the only reason that you're second place overall in the Fantasy Pros Championship. I think another reason that you're up there, Chris Godwin. Now, in a lot of my preseason shows, and I think Aiden LaCourre, who does a lot of the graphics for the FFPC, put out a thing, a graphic of all the people we had on for our live draft coverage, who their must-get player was, or who their player that they really wanted to get on as many teams as they could this year was. And he asked me, and I said, well, there's a few players, but if nobody picks Chris Godwin, give me Chris Godwin. I got this guy in a lot of spots. I love the fact that he was moving back to the slot. Did not see this Baker Mayfield continuation of not only what he did last year, Larry, but taking it to a new level without Dave Canales as his offensive coordinator. I'm blown away by the Buccaneers offense this year. Chris Godwin has been a big part of that. Small sample size, 6 weeks. So how likely is it that he's going to keep up this production over the course of the duration of the 2024 season?
Yeah, I don't know that he's going to have the week he had that last play when he broke the tackle and got the touchdown. I kind of pulled that out. I'm pretty comfortable, without any injuries, knock wood, that, he's certainly a 20-point game guy. He gets the targets. Evans, I've never been I've never been a big Mike Evans fan. I've always wanted to I've always liked Godwin on the cheap. I don't know. Some players, even though they just don't do it for you, even though they seem to be really good players, Evans has just been one of those guys for me.
I think if you're a Godwin guy, that would kind of explain why you've kind of been off Evans. You're always waiting around and let Evans go to somebody else and pick up Godwin later.
That's what I've been doing the last couple of years, and it probably hasn't worked up until this year so far. But I'm all in on Godwin. I have him on 3 or 4 Fantasy Pros and 1 of 2 of my main events. And I would have him on all, except I just can't have 100%.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get that for sure.
I have to diversify a little.
I look at I think it was just a bunch of your teams. I can't remember if I was looking at the second place team overall or if it was a bunch of them. But I did notice Samaje Perine on a few of those teams, and I have Perine on a few of my teams as well. With Clyde Edwards-Helaire's status up in the air, even with Kareem Hunt seeming to have the leg up on everybody else in the backfield, how settled do you think that running back situation is in Kansas City right now? With obviously Carson Steele still getting a few touches, you have Hunt, you have Perine, and now maybe CEH coming back.
I don't think it's settled. I don't know. I mean, the first time it ever got settled was really with Pacheco, but I don't think it's settled. I don't think it's settled at all. I have Perine on a couple of teams. Everyone was like, "Oh, you got to drop him now." I'm not dropping him. He's worth just stashing on and see if he ends up picking up that third down role that, McKinnon had, which is possible. So I don't know. I have one Hunt. I picked up one Hunt pretty cheap. That
had to be early on, like a few weeks ago, right?
Right when the injuries happened, before he played the first game, I picked him up. It was pretty cheap. And I'm glad to have him. I don't even know if I'm going to play him this week because I have the team he's on is pretty stacked. But I think it's not settled yet. We're going to who knows what's going to go on with that team. with the running backs.
Right, exactly, and that's the thing. It's like I hate to do it. I've cut Pirine in a few leagues, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
It's a matter of like, because I know how talented he is inside the 5. I know how talented he is catching the ball out of the backfield. But I also look at Hunt and CAH, and it's not like Pirine's doing anything to not get touches. But I do know that Kansas City wants to get other guys involved. I think Michael Kenzel was posted in the YouTube chat earlier something about like, what is it with these 3-headed rushing attacks? Miami, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, San Francisco, and now Houston, not to mention Kansas City. We'll see what happens there. But I think that's like the next tier below. It's been crazy this year. And I think the good and the bad thing about these 3-headed attacks, Larry, is the good thing is you don't have to worry about starting these guys, right?
Yeah.
Because unless somebody goes down or whatever, you can't really start any of them. The bad part is you want to try to roster as many of the pieces as you can, and we only have a finite amount of roster spots here.
Yeah. I think, everyone wants to roster Kansas City. I don't know if, they have, as you know, they have not been the greatest offense in the last basically 16 games, pretty much midseason last year. They're winners. Mahomes knows how to win, but they haven't been blown away with the offensive stats.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. It's been wild. It's gonna, and by the way, it's gonna continue to get even more wild as we're just entering week 7 here. Things are gonna get even crazier as we go on going forward. I don't even want to move off Kansas City because as crazy as their backfield is, you think about the injuries they've had at wide receiver this year, with Hollywood Brown and
Rice.
Thank you, Rashee Rice. I wanted to say Ridley Scott. I had movies. Yeah. I knew that wasn't it. Rashee Rice, exactly. So going forward here, and you can answer this question for week 7 against your San Francisco 49ers for the Chiefs, or you could talk about it as more of like a season-long thing. Are you more a believer in 2024 only in Xavier Worthy or Juju Smith-Schuster as a better fantasy start in that Chiefs offense?
Yeah, I have a Worthy on that team, and I think I have him on my main event team. I have him on a main event team that's doing pretty well. I like Worthy. I think that I really like this 2-week. I like the bye break. I like them figuring out how to use him more after the bye. The kid's talented. They have they've been kind of not using him as a traditional receiver. A little gimmicky, but. And also, I'm excited that he could have a good second half. But he's also the kind of guy, if comes playoff time, in the FFPC, he's a guy who could get you 2-3 touchdowns in a game.
Right.
And I've never liked Juju. I wouldn't even bid on him, even though he had a good game last week. I'm just not a Juju fan.
See, now the difference for me is like, and I'm not going to take the total opposing view, but somewhat of opposing view. So Worthy to me was a guy that I knew had more polish coming out of college than just a speedster. I think you break the record at the combine. I think automatically you think, okay, this guy's a speedster. He doesn't run the full route tree. Maybe he will someday, but year 1, maybe not the greatest play. But I knew he had more juice than that. I knew he was more of a skilled receiver than just a simple 9-route guy. Smith-Schuster is a guy that I grabbed cheap before the big the 7 for 130 or whatever he had on the Saints. Yeah. Anyway, I got him on the cheap, right? So I actually have more Smith-Schuster than Worthy, but I can't argue. I always say, Larry, that this is a young man's game.
Yeah.
And I can't argue that Worthy has the juice. He has the youth on his side. And Smith-Schuster, as great as that was to see 7 for 130, I almost wonder if that was going to be his best game going forward the rest of the season, even without Rice, even without Hollywood Brown in the lineup. And it's a sneak. Like I'm probably going to have to flex him out in a few leagues this week, and I'm very nervous about it against the Niners too. Like that's going to be wild. It's going to be a wild ride, that game.
Yeah, I actually, I think Worthy's 49ers don't have anyone on their defense who can match the speed of Worthy in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a mismatch. I'm a huge 49er fan, but I'll take 2 Worthy touchdowns.
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that was wild about Worthy was that for that opening game against the Ravens on Thursday night, where it changed his ADP. And I was kind of like, oh, maybe I got to readjust the way I think about Worthy because of the creative ways that the Chiefs were using him as well. And I don't think the Chiefs used Juju Smith-Schuster that way. I think Worthy is a little bit more difficult for a defensive coordinator to game plan against rather than Smith-Schuster, who I think the cookie cutter analysis was that is he's going to get more touches. I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Where would he went if we went into the draft weekend and we knew that Hollywood Brown and Rice were going to be out for pretty much the whole season? Where would Worthy have went? He would have went quite a bit higher.
Yeah, he would have. Now I'm going to look this up right now because after the game, after the Thursday night game, Worthy did shoot up in ADP, and this was knowing that Brown would be back at some point and knowing that Rice was healthy.
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy was still going at the end of the 4th round.
End of 4th.
With Hollywood Brown coming back, within the next few weeks, and Rashee Rice healthy, and he was going in the 4th round. It would have been insane, crazy town, banana pants, if he would have, had.
Yeah, he might have even drafted earlier than Neighbors.
Maybe, yeah, 2nd round.
Not
I would
that he
say
should have. Obviously, he shouldn't have, but he might have.
But that's the way that we think. That's the way a lot of drafters think. So I think that's an interesting thing to bring up too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the other trade. Amari Cooper goes to the Buffalo Bills. We're excited about that. We think this is going to be a big uptick in his fantasy production. But I'm more curious about Jerry Jeudy, who was the number 2 wide receiver on a bad offense. He's now the number 1 receiver, still on a bad offense, and quite frankly, probably a worse offense now that Cooper is gone. What kind of spike, if any kind of spike, are you expecting with Jeudy now that he's ascended to the role of WR1 for Deshaun Watson's Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Watson's having like historic bad season. I mean, literally over the last 6 years, he's like literally the worst ranked quarterback in pretty much every stat. Jeudy and Judy's never really performed. I own him on 2 teams just kind of as a flyer because I believe there might be still the talent there that everyone thought when he came out of college. He's probably not playable. I probably want to just see what happens this weekend. I mean, I'm just hoping Winston gets the job, but for some reason, the Cleveland Browns are not going to do that, whether it's the money or whatever with Watson. But I'm going to wait a game. And if I see that, because Jeudy, with Watson, it's like you got to get 20 targets to get 8 catches right now.
Yeah. It's very true.
And so it's like if he gets 10 targets, I'm hoping for 4 or 5 catches. They're not a good team, and they're a good defensive team, so they're not going to be around the end zone a lot. So I'd play him in a pinch, if I had to this week. I have twice. I'm not sure if I'm thinking about playing him on one of my teams, but I would rather wait a week, see what happens, and hope maybe Watson has another bad week and they go to Winston. It might be fun if Winston's throwing to him.
Oh, totally. That's what we're all rooting for. And I don't think we're ever going to see it. That's the frustrating thing.
No, probably not.
It's going to have to be until Watson gets, towards the last couple of years of that contract. And I don't know what Winston signed for, but I'm sure it's not long-term. No. And I'm sure he wants to move on. Like he knows he's not playing in Cleveland unless Watson gets hurt, or like I have said, Watson needs to fake an injury so he can go on IR. So there's no, he doesn't get, he doesn't feel bad because everybody thinks he's hurt. Winston has the opportunity to pump the ball downfield 40, 45 times a game. He'll throw 2 or 3 picks. It doesn't matter. Cleveland's not going anywhere. And then Njoku and Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy are catching all these passes, and they're suddenly fantasy relevant. It's my fever dream, Larry, that I know will never come to reality.
I mean, if you're him, what's more embarrassing, the way you're playing or getting benched? I think getting benched is less embarrassing than the way he's playing.
Yeah, and it's going to come, like, obviously ownership would have to get involved in order for Watson to get benched. So, and I don't know if that's going to happen. In fact, I'm probably pretty sure it's not going to happen. So I've just kind of resigned myself knowing that it's going to be a Deshaun Watson team this year. It's going to be a Deshaun Watson offense, and we just got to deal with it. And maybe he'll have a couple of good games here and there, but I'm never going to know when to start my Cleveland Browns. Although Njoku is a little interesting, right? Without Cooper there in a tight end premium format like the FFPC, Njoku is interesting, Larry.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good player. I liked him going into drafts this year. I just didn't end up somehow. I just never ended up with any of him on my teams, but I liked him going in. I certainly didn't fade him. I just didn't end up with him.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was like too, because
Yeah.
when I tend to try to, even though I'm an employee of the FFPC, so I don't play in the FFPC, but I play in these other in the KFFSC, which
Yeah.
is non-tight end premium. And when I'm playing in that, I still like to have a top 5 or 6 tight end. And when I draft like that, I usually miss out on like the David Njoku's of the world, or the Evan Ingrams or Brock Bowers, who are going outside the top 5 or 6 tight ends, which sucks about Bowers this year, obviously. But Njoku, I missed out on too. And quite frankly, I don't know what to expect here going forward, but I think we'll learn a lot this weekend to see how the Browns offense runs without Amari Cooper and with Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku as the primary pass catchers. And oh, by the way, I think we got an email about Nick Chubb and the Browns rushing attack later on, so we'll get to that in a little bit. Staying in the same division, let's stick with the AFC North here. Pittsburgh Steelers backfield. Is Najee, like, I'm certainly not advocating anybody to cut Jaylen Warren here. And we could bring up Cordero Patterson as well, Larry. But is Harris the only guy that we need to be thinking about starting in week 7? I believe this game is Sunday Night Football against the New York Jets. So a team that you can technically run on. Your thoughts on Harris? Is he the only starting Steelers running back we need to worry about this week?
I think for this week, I mean, I've never been a Najee hater. There's so many Najee haters. Mm-hmm. I always thought the guy ran hard. So I've had him in the past. But I think this week I would probably go with Najee. I like Warren. Warren's talented. I don't think his talent left him. So I think that if someone dropped him, I'd be picking him up as quick as I could. I don't know that anyone's going to be dropping Warren. And Ray Davis looked ridiculously good. I don't know if it's because the Jets are not that good against the rush, but he looked phenomenal actually the other night. He looked like one of the better running backs in the league, the way he was just pounding them. So I would be with Najee. Najee's coming off probably his best game that he ever had last week. I'd be playing Najee if I had him.
Yeah, I would too. And I wonder if that thing flip-flops, given that Harris is going to have this heavy workload on his legs in September and October, but then come the end of next month or December, Warren's the guy with fresher legs. I think a lot of people we talked to on this show over the course of drafting season talked about how Warren is the more explosive player. He's the better pass catcher. He's the guy that they wanted to be in business with. And then when it came down to it, Warren got hurt, and he's been hurt, and it's been very difficult for him to carve a role in this offense. And meanwhile, Harris is making his role even stronger. Right now, that thing could flip, over the next a few weeks for sure.
Yeah, everybody was loving Warren, pre-drafts and during the drafts. And then when you looked at Arthur Smith, though, Najee Harris was definitely an Arthur Smith type running back.
Oh yeah,
that you always had to put the Arthur Smith equation in your decisions about the Pittsburgh Steelers this year.
What about Patterson? Your thoughts on him? Should he?
I have him on like 2 or 3 teams.
So you're still rostering him?
Because he's good. Smith likes him, and I will drop him for a better. He's part of the group of running backs that I have, hoping something. The second guy will go down. So I dropped him maybe once or twice this week for Dearness or maybe Taylor, but I had a couple. I'm not sure. I had a couple of Pattersons that I might still have left that I was getting him for nothing, just throwing away what I had, like my bottom garbage players that just were doing nothing, because he can still. And they were playing him when he wasn't hurt.
Mm-hmm. It's Patterson is the equivalent of like the person that you're dating. That you kind of like and you'll keep around, but once something better comes around, boom, they're gone, and then you're on to the next new thing, basically, for the Steelers. Let's talk about the Texans here. Nico Collins has been placed on IR. He's going to miss, I think, 3 more weeks here before he's eligible to come off. Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell did the heavy lifting, along with Dalton Schultz, quite frankly, this past week as the Texans rolled in their game. Is there another receiver? I'm thinking Xavier Hutchinson or anybody else that you would want to roster from the Texans while Collins is out, as long as Diggs and Dell are healthy, Larry?
No, I wouldn't touch anyone. It's 3. I mean, last week, I think they had like 24, 25 targets between Dell and Diggs and Schultz. And then the running backs, no, I'm not interested. I have a bunch of Diggs, and I think there's better ways to go for a Hail Mary than the 4th, 5th receiver on that team.
Yeah, and they're going up against the Packers defense this week
Yeah.
that has been fairly talented. I mean, they have 17 turnovers this year. That's 4 more than anybody else in the NFL right now. The secondary looks to be as healthy as it's been all season with Alexander back last week. Xavier McKinney's been unbelievable too. And I have no doubt that Diggs and Dell are going to get theirs at Sunday at Lambeau Field. However, after that, I mean, let's just look at what happened last week. CJ Stroud threw 31 balls last week. 7 targets to Diggs, 9 to Dell, 8 to Schultz. That adds up to 24. That's only 7 targets for Joe Mixon and Damian Pierce and Cade Stover and Xavier Hutchinson. By the way, 2 targets, didn't catch either one. I'm with you, Larry. This is a Diggs and Dell and to a certain extent a Dalton Schultz show, FFPC tight end premium. After that, I'm out. And obviously Mixon you're going to play too because of the rushing aspect.
And I think Green Bay is going to make him throw hopefully more than 31 times this week.
You would think. I mean, it should be a higher scoring game. We'll see what happens there because I think both teams are pretty talented on both sides of the ball. So I just think this is going to be a fun matchup for
it looks like a good
fans
game
in general. Scott Kobe in the YouTube chat, one of our former guests of the show. Do you guys play anyone in the Saints-Broncos game tomorrow night? And mother of God, this has been crazy. So Derek Carr, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed all ruled out for this game. Bub Means, I think, is interesting because he was catching passes from Spencer Rattler, who's going to be starting again on the scout team most of the season. And I think there's something to be said for that. However, he's still Bub Means, and I think he is a second flex at best for the Saints. Still playing Kamara for sure. Nobody else on that team. Saints defense. I'm actually playing in a couple of leagues as well. Flip it to the other side with Denver. You're not playing Knicks. I think the Broncos running game is kind of a mess. Sutton is like kind of like Bub Means-esque, where you only play him if you have to. There, I don't really have interest in anybody else. Again, maybe except for the Denver defense there. This could be an ugly game tomorrow. It's Kamara, and it's not a whole lot else for me, Larry.
Yeah, I'm playing. I have Denver defense. I'm playing twice. I picked them up before last week's game a couple of times. So I'm playing them on 2 different teams. I think that's pretty solid against a rookie with no receivers. And the only other player that I have Sheed, but he looks like he's gone now for a while.
Yeah.
The only other player that I would maybe have to play would be the tight end Johnson on New Orleans.
Sure.
But I tried to pick up because I have Dallas Goedert on one of my main event teams. So I had Dallas Goedert and I have Hutchinson and I have Johnson. I don't know if Hutchinson's going to play on Sunday, and I can't wait because it's a Thursday game.
Right.
So I tried to drop and I don't want to play Johnson and then find out that Hutchinson's playing. So I tried to pick up whatever the backup in Philly, Calvetti or something, the backup in Philly.
For Goddard?
For Goddard, yeah.
Grant
and I overbid. I was like, I have to get him. I went 109. Hopefully I got him.
Now here's the thing with Calcaterra. Like you say you overbid on him, but we saw Permar at 99 in the chat talking about Calcaterra, how he was a good pickup this week. I did the High Stakes Fantasy Football show last night on the Better Sports Network with Nelson Sousa, who's won. He's a former FFPC main event champ. Yeah. And he talked about Calcaterra and how good of a pickup that he was going to be this week. You say 109 is overbidding. I don't know if you overbid for him. And this guy, I don't think you overbid for him, number one. And number two, I don't think Calcaterra is just limited to a 1 week play.
No,
this is a soft tissue thing for Goddard. This could knock him out for a few weeks. And Calcaterra caught 4 passes in that game against Cleveland. There could be something there for sure.
And he caught a couple of passes even while Goddard was on the field.
Exactly. Yeah. While Goddard was still out there. That's true.
That was my feeling is I might need him for a couple of weeks. I don't know what's going to happen with Hutchinson. I'm hoping he comes back certainly next week, if not this week. And I just I would not be happy if I played Johnson and then Hutchinson was going to play on Sunday. So I might even, if I didn't get Calvert, I'll pick someone else up on Sunday that might get less points than Johnson. Actually, I'll have some time to figure it out. Actually,
right. You would.
So yeah, that would be. And the other thing I'm hoping is, New Orleans showed a pretty bad rush defense. I'm hoping that I have a little bit of Javonte Williams and I have a little bit of Este. So I'm hoping maybe Este gets out there and just has one of these rookie great games and all of a sudden he's the starter and then now he's playable going forward.
Estime is a guy that I had on a couple of teams. I think I might have dropped him on one of my teams tonight, but I also tried to pick him up on a couple other teams too, just to stash and see what happens.
Yeah.
I just feel like that Denver backfield is ripe for the taking from somebody, and just nobody's taking advantage of it.
Yeah,
Yet.
I think it's worth a wait because they do have a good defense and they could keep games low scoring. And if Nix develops a little bit, he hasn't been horrible.
Right. I Troy Franklin's coming on there too, so maybe another weapon on the perimeter. Jimmy Williams, I want to post his chat from YouTube. Also interesting is what backup running back in New Orleans do you like rest of season? And this obviously comes down to Jamal Williams or Kendra Miller. I've rostered Kendra Miller in a few spots. I know Dennis Allen seems to go out of his way to talk about how disappointed and upset he is with Kendra Miller, and he's been doing it since the summer. But I just don't know how much juice Jamal Williams has left. I'm a Kendra Miller guy here. If I'm going to roster a backup running back in New Orleans, it's Miller. What about for you, Larry?
At this point, I would go with Miller. I had like maybe 2 or 3 shares of Jamal Williams early on. You know, he was like he was like my 18th, 19th, 20th round pick or whatever it was. It was pretty late. Just feeling like, okay, he's the backup now. Miller's injured and he's in the doghouse. I don't know what the hell, Kamara was my big miss of the year. I didn't get any Kamara and I should have, but I'd be more excited about I dropped all my pickups this week was dropping Jamal Williams. He was the drop for the new running backs.
Right. And I think that when you look at the Saints situation here, it's fun to think about who the backup running back would be, who we should roster. But at the same time, we have to understand Olave's out with a concussion, and maybe he's back next week or whatever. Shaheed could be out for the year. Derek Carr is going to be out for several weeks. Like, this Saints offense needs to kind of come together and get healthy. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if one of these running backs, steps forward. If Kamara goes down, it's going to be rough sledding for him and a player you just don't want to play.
Yeah. And after week 2, everyone was handing the Saints the Super Bowl.
Yes. I was just talking about that the other day. Remember, Clint Kubiak was like God's gift to offense in New Orleans. They put up 40 plus points in the first weeks, and then they've really been struggling ever since then. It's a long season. Things change pretty quick in New Orleans. So that is what's going on there with the Saints backup running back. I want to shift the focus here. Yeah. We're running. I don't want to say we're running late on time, but I want to get to a few more topics. So let's get to the question that Farrell normally asks at the end of the episode. I'm going to ask you right now, Larry, a sleeper that you're going to try to wedge in to all your lineups in the FFPC this week. And then conversely, another player that you think a lot of FFPC players are going to start this week, but they're ultimately going to be disappointed with the performance.
Okay. A sleeper. I would, Mike Wilson, if Marvin Harrison isn't going, I have him. He's been, he's very playable on a bye week. He could usually get you 8 to 11 points. He seems to be a pretty good receiver. I don't know if he doesn't get open a lot or what the deal is, but he's solid. I think he's developing, and he could have a decent game. So I would go with him and another throw and maybe a Hunter Henry. I don't know if that's considered a sleeper, but maybe a Hunter Henry.
Yeah, I would say so. Because, I mean, there's some people that have Hunter Henry, even in tight end premium, that are not going to play him this week that I think should seriously think about him. That's the London game, Sunday morning against Jacksonville, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd play him. I would play him. I would play him on my team where I was talking about. If I had Hunter Henry, I'd love to have him on that team for this week without Goddard and Hutchinson. As far as this is going to be kind of controversial fade, and it's a player I like, and it's a top player, but Jamar Chase.
Ooh, that is spicy. Here we go.
Well, do you know what he did against Cleveland last year?
I know
Cleveland's defense was better last year, but I think it's somewhat similar cornerbacks. He was 4 catches for 19 yards and 5 catches for 39 yards last year.
Wow.
I don't know if that plays. I don't know if that matters this year. And he just came off a pretty good game. And I think Cleveland could get some pressure on Burrow because they still have a good defensive line there. So, listen, I'd play him. I would not. Of course, if I had Chase, I'd be starting him. But the game is, who's a big name who you would. The other one, Pickens. Pickens. I think it's a tough matchup against the Jets. We don't know what Wilson's going to look like.
Right.
So those are two spicy names. I would definitely play Chase. I would think about playing Pickens, depending upon what the rest of my lineup was.
That's how I would be too. I would understand the risk of Chase, but I'd still trot him out there. And then
Yeah,
regarding Pickens, I think he could be like a 50-50 guy,
yeah.
depending upon what your other options are. I think that makes perfect sense. Let's move on and talk about some of the stuff we learned about with injuries today. Larry, the Colts head coach Shane Steichen said that Trey Sermon has a shoulder injury. This, according to Nate Atkins. Now, originally, he said it was a shoulder. The team said later on it's a knee injury. If you think about what the Colts did in week 6 and ruling out Anthony Richardson with about an hour or so before game time, I don't know what they're capable of, and they could be playing games here again with Trey Sermon. This is very interesting because Taylor says his ankle is feeling better, but he didn't practice today. What are we doing with Colts running backs, specifically if Sermon and Taylor are both out? How good of a play is Tyler Goodson in week 7?
Yeah, I mean, us both being Bears, we probably both love Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, totally. Yes.
I have him on I have him on 2 teams, I think. So I'm not happy with the injury. I actually ended up trying to pick up on my 2 teams. I tried to pick up Goodson. I don't know if I got him. I wasn't bidding that high. I think I was like 39, 45, something like that. So I don't know if I'm going to get him. But I felt like, let me just have him as backup for Taylor. I don't even know if I'm going to play him. I think I might have a better option. But Trey Sermon was drafted he was the annual 3rd round pick that sucks by Shanahan, which he does every year, 3rd, 4th round pick. And then he gets these great free agents or 7th rounders. It's the craziest thing. I would play Goodson over Sermon, even if they both were playing. I think he's a better player, and he's the catching back also.
I brought this up in one of my shows this week too, and I'll bring it up again. When you look at that Colts Titans box score from last week, Tyler Goodson only had 8 carries, but he got 51 yards.
Yeah.
Trey Sermon had 18 carries, and he failed to hit 30 yards rushing. 29 yards rushing is what he had. Trey Sermon not targeted in the passing game. Tyler Goodson, 5 targets. He catches 4 of them for 14 yards. Yeah, I think Goodson is the play this week in Indianapolis. I didn't cut him anywhere. I picked him up a little bit in a few leagues last week, and then I'm eager to see what happens. And that game, too, that Colts game is indeed a 1 p.m. kickoff. So you will know on Sunday morning what you're going to be doing with Tyler Goodson and the Colts.
And the Titans, they're a good defense. So he did that against a good defense, the nice running average.
Right. Yes, exactly. Let's move on and talk. We just kind of talked about Pickens a little bit. I want to bring this up from the Athletics, Mike DeFabo, who said he wrote today that Russell Wilson's lack of mobility might be a problem for the entire Steelers offense. Mike Tomlin is going to be coy about this. We may not find out until Sunday what he's going to do. Pittsburgh is playing Sunday night. They're playing Sunday night, so it's even worse. They play Sunday night against the Jets. DeFabo said that Wilson led the NFL in sacks taken 2 out of the last 5 years, and the Steelers offensive line is not only banged up, it doesn't have a lot of experience on it too. Quote from DeFabo: Wilson also leaned on his mobility in his younger days to extend plays and create outside of structure. The Steelers should not expect him to be this type of passer and will need to evolve the offense accordingly. Holy cow. What are we doing? Not necessarily with the Steelers quarterbacks here, Larry, but with Pickens, with Pat Freiermuth, with Najee Harris. This is going to affect a lot of people if Wilson is the starting quarterback over Fields.
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous move to play Wilson. I don't see the upside. I mean, Wilson's not going to become your franchise quarterback. Fields has, whether it's 1% or 50%, he has more than a 0% chance to become something. And he wasn't playing that. I mean, he made quite a few mistakes, but he was getting the job done. I wouldn't. And with the Jets defense, which is certainly a good pass defense, excellent cornerbacks, a good pass rush. I think there could be a lot of running in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't. Now that I remember, I wouldn't be playing. We were just talking about Pickens. That 50-50 probably just went down to a 20-80 on me of playing.
Potentially, it could be. I mean, like if you think about it, and I'm gonna bring this up right now. And sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to bring this up against the Jets. That total is only 38. And the Steelers are 1.5 point home dogs in that game. if they are forced to start throwing, and quite frankly, wouldn't surprise me at all if Adams and Wilson and Conklin and Rodgers and Hall are crushing it, even against that Steelers defense, and the Steelers find themselves down by double digits in the third or maybe the fourth quarter. Yeah, Pickens should get some action there. Now, I know you don't like to bet on stuff like that happening, but it's certainly a non-zero chance of it. So, I think this is not going to be great if Russell Wilson's the starting quarterback. I also don't know how big of a downgrade it is, though.
Yeah, it's probably no. I mean, it can't be that big of a downgrade. You're not going from the top of Mount Rushmore to the bottom of the hill there. You're going from Fields has not been playing that well, or else he would have solidified that job. I don't know if Tomlin had made Russell Wilson this promise that you're going to start when you're ready. That's why he went there, even though we're not paying you any money. So it might be an integrity thing. And Tomlin seems like a guy who has integrity.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There could have been something that was decided upon way before the season started.
Permar 99 does not think the Jets offensive line will hold up against the Pittsburgh defense, and he could be right, quite frankly. Yeah. I know a few Jets fans who were kind of excited about the Adams trade, but they're like, at the same time, Adams is not going to block. He's not going to keep these defensive linemen off of Rodgers, so it might be a lot of quick passes, and that would help Conklin and Hall too in that game.
And it could be over pretty quick. J.J. Watt could take Rodgers. Rodgers been getting hit a lot.
Yes.
He got hit a lot the other night, and J.J. Watt could take him out of the game pretty quickly.
And that's the thing too, is you have to make sure that Rodgers stays upright in that game, and which might mean adding another guy onto Watt to chip him, to make sure that you're double teaming that guy to keep him off Rodgers so he has time to throw. I think with all the storylines going on in that game, Adams and Rodgers reunited, the Steelers making a quarterback change, that's going to be a fun Sunday night game for sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Titans backfield. I think this is kind of interesting. Brian Callahan, the head coach of Tennessee, said that Tyjae Spears is week to week, not day to day, with a hamstring injury. My read into week to week, Larry, I don't know what yours is, but to me, if somebody is week to week, they're probably not playing that week, and they're already looking forward to another week down the road. Spears probably will not be playing against the Bills. This could be huge for Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is going to be the lead running back against the Bills this week. There is a running back named Julius Chestnut, who is the third string guy for the Titans. 1 carry, 2 yards against the Colts. I can't imagine we're going to see a 60-40 split or even a 70-30 split there. It's going to be all Tony Pollard all the time. I love him against the Bills this week, not necessarily for the matchup, but for the volume and a guy who shows he can catch passes. I'm a big fan of Pollard this week, my friend.
Yeah, I'm real excited about that. And he's on my number 2 team, so I'm excited about that.
I should look at the total on that game too, because I am deploying the Bills defense in a lot of leagues this week for my teams. That is a total of 41, and the Bills are 9-point favorites. So the implied total for the Titans in that game is like, what would that be? Even like 15, 16, something like that. It's not good. Not great, Bob, as we learned from Mad Men.
You can't get too much points when you have their quarterback.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing too that Joe King brings up, Ray Davis getting the start ? I got burned in a couple of leagues by starting James Cook and then not having a replacement for him on Monday night. Ray Davis looked awesome. You can run on the Titans decently. It's not like they're terrible, but they're not great. So you can run on them. If Ray Davis gets the start, I mean, I think if James Cook is inactive, you got to find a way to get Ray Davis in your lineup, especially after what we saw this past week.
Yeah, I agree. He looked really solid. I had James Cook on one team. I got the Ty Johnson backup because Ray Davis wasn't available, and it was crazy. He comes out and he has a nice 12-yard. Well, you watched, he had a nice 12-yarder. He ran well, but Ray Davis just took over the whole show.
Yeah.
But no, I'd find a way to get Ray Davis in the lineup if he was starting.
Yeah, absolutely. And unlike week 6, this is a 1 p.m. kickoff. So you won't have to wait around. You can play him and deploy him. You won't have to figure out to see if Cook is active or not. Now, if Cook is active, then you play Cook, and I don't think you can play Davis unless it's like an emergency type thing. But yeah, I mean, I think this could be very lucrative for Ray Davis owners this week as well.
Yeah.
Let's get into fantasy feedback. A few minutes left in the show here, Larry. A few emails for us. We'll go to Art in Shortsville, New New York, actually. You kind of answered this earlier, but I want to get clarification on it. With Marvin Harrison probably out, should I start Michael Wilson over Calvin Ridley this weekend? Thanks, guys. That's Art in Shortsville, New York. The Titans offense we just talked about, it's not a great matchup against Buffalo. And Calvin Ridley has been scuffling quite a bit. Michael Wilson, you talked about how this guy could make a dent against the Packers on Sunday too. Wilson or Ridley, who are you feeling here?
I'd go Wilson. I mean, Ridley was. You and I had as many points last week, and he had 8 more targets than us.
That's true. We were more efficient than Calvin Ridley.
We were more efficient. He got 0 for 8. I think that's never happened before. And it wasn't even his fault. I don't know, maybe 2 of them were even catchable. So I would probably, I don't think this case, the squeaky wheel, it doesn't matter when the thing is broken and you got a broken quarterback. So I'd go with Wilson.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You bring up the squeaky wheel. Grease will fix a squeaky wheel. But if it's broken and the spokes are shattered, ain't no amount of grease that is going to fix that for sure. Dustin in Pensacola, Florida. Is Tucker Kraft the better play over Kyle Pitts on Sunday? This is interesting too. When we look at the matchup here, obviously Tucker Kraft at home against the Texans. Kyle Pitts is at home against the Seahawks. I believe that Seattle-Atlanta game is the highest total of any game this week. It's sitting at 51 right now. Kraft or Pitts easily could be a decision that a lot of FFPC players have to make this week, Larry. How would you make that decision?
Yeah, I'd go Pitts. I'm not a big Pitts guy. I have 1 share, and I've never had a share before this year. I always faded him because I just didn't buy it. I would go Pitts. He's 12th. He's like 12th right now. He's the tight end 12 in FFPC. He's had one bagel. Otherwise, he's had giving you the solid 6 to 15 points, and maybe he's coming on a little bit. I like Tucker Kraft. That you guys have so many friggin', I guess you're going to have a lot of injuries. Depending upon the injuries, I mean, if Wicks isn't there, Wicks isn't going to be there, right?
It's interesting you say that because he did get in a limited practice today.
Okay.
I thought for sure he was going to be out. So I still think he doesn't play this week, but I'm a little bit more bullish on him potentially playing this week now.
Yeah, if you have your 5 receivers, then I would definitely go Pitts because you guys have 5 good receivers. And, Atlanta has, they have a couple good receivers, but I go Pitts.
He put up the bagel, to your point, on September 29th, did Kyle Pitts. 3 targets, no catches. But since then, in that massive Thursday night game, 7 catches, 88 yards. And then this past week against the Panthers, 3 catches on 5 targets for 70 yards. He actually has hit over 50 yards in 3 out of his last 4 games. So maybe there is something to be said for that. And to your point, not anything against Tucker Kraft, but Watson's going to be out there. Reed's going to be out there. Dobbs is going to be out there. Maybe Wicks, we'll see. And then obviously Josh Jacobs as well. So there is a lot of stuff going on with Green Bay too. This is going to be a fun one here, Larry. At this next one, I got to find the email here. Kelly in Waco, Texas. How's it going, fellas? It seems crazy, but is Sam Darnold the correct starter over Patrick Mahomes this week? Thanks so much, Kelly in Waco, Texas. Add this to the list of things I would never thought we would be talking about in week 7 of the 2024 season. Do I play Sam Darnold over Patrick Mahomes this week? Sam Darnold is going to be going against the Detroit Lions coming off the bye this week. That is in Minnesota. Patrick Mahomes taking on your San Francisco 49ers in Santa Clara, or as I have dubbed it, the Big Denim. Levi Stadium. That's what I'm calling it here. It's starting to catch on a little bit. I don't know if it'll catch on fully, but
I'll try and help you with that cause.
Thank you. I need the West Coast push. So you have the Super Bowl rematch, the Chiefs against the Niners, Patrick Mahomes going up against San Francisco on their home turf. Are you strong enough to start Sam Darnold over Mahomes this week, Larry?
I'm strong enough sitting here with you to say that I think it could be a high-scoring game. And even though Green Bay is really good at intercepting, Darnold doesn't care. He could maybe get 4 touchdowns and 2 or 3 interceptions. Now, if I'm sitting there, on a main event team and I have to click him over Mahomes, I don't know if I could do it.
Right.
My logic here now says, Mahomes has not, what is he? Not even been a top 15 for like the last 16 or 17 weeks, something of that sort. He manages to beat the 49ers every time, but not because he plays well like for the last 8 minutes of the 2 Super Bowls they played. That was it. The first 52 minutes, he did nothing. I don't know. I think on the record, I don't know for the record I could ever say Darnold over Mahomes. It just doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. But fantasy, like this is like I always say, I'm a weak man on this show. I actually think I'm strong enough to pull the trigger on this, to play Darnold over Mahomes this week. I may end up regretting it and be kicking myself.
Well,
But to Kelly and Waco, I think I would do it. I don't I don't have to make I don't have to make this decision myself, Larry.
Well,
like this is somebody else's team. If it was my team, then I don't know.
So much would depend upon my team. If I was okay, I got a really solid everything else. I just need 15 to 18 points. Mahomes is probably going to get me that. Donald could come up with an 8 to 10 pointer on you. He could also give you the 30 pointer.
Yeah.
So it really depends upon where I think I'm getting points that week. It wouldn't be so cut and dry, the decision.
Larry, Kyler Murray's been struggling lately, and Michael Kinzel asked this too. How about Bo Nix over Kyler Murray this week? That I cannot do.
I can't do it.
I would still be doing Murray against the Chargers over Bo Nix. The Saints defense has not been a problem this year. They've been all right, and I think that they're going to have a decent night tomorrow night against the Broncos. So I'm still playing Kyler Murray, Michael. We'll end crazy talk there with the Darnold Mahomes discussion. We'll all join everybody back on planet Earth now.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler or Alexander Madison is the next one here. Hello, Balky and Larry. Should I rock with Austin Eckler or Alexander Madison for an FFPC flex? That is Roger in Akron, Ohio, who's asking us about that. So this week you have Eckler, and I do believe Robinson practiced today for the Commanders.
I saw that. Yeah.
They get Carolina at home. Yep, they get Carolina at home, so that's a really good matchup for Eckler. Alexander Madison is taking on the Rams at SoFi in Los Angeles. I don't know who that's a home game for. Maybe nobody.
It's not the Rams. Yeah.
I don't know if it's the Raiders either. Do the Raiders fans travel? I don't know if they do.
No, probably not.
So
probably not.
We'll just have a bunch of NFL fans. But Eckler or Alexander Madison this week, do you have a lean either way here?
Yeah, I just can't play it. Madison. It's Eckler. Eckler could have a couple of catches and he could beat what Madison does. I'm not a Madison. I'm just shocked that Madison is a starting running back in the NFL right now.
And Zamir White, I do believe, came back to practice today. So there is that little aspect that could be gumming up the works for Madison. And, you would think that Eckler and Brian Robinson are the guys for Washington.
Yeah.
In fact, it might be a light Jaden Daniels week. I hate to predict stuff like that because Daniels could easily throw 3 touchdowns in the first half, and he's worth starting too. So, but I'm with you. I think it's Eckler over Madison here. How the hour has flown by. Great stuff tonight from you, Larry. Learned so much. Great insight from you. Very entertaining. I wish nothing but the best for your Niners going forward. This is a big game for them this week. But most importantly, stay up there at the top of the Fantasy Pros Championship leaderboard. You only have to leapfrog one more guy, and you only got, about 10 more weeks, 11 more weeks to go before you get that $1 million grand prize. Excellent job co-hosting tonight. Thank you so much, and good luck in all your leagues. And go Bucky against Northwestern on Saturday.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks for the invite.
You did.
Take care.
Larry, we'll see you later. Talk again real soon.
Bye-bye.
That is Larry Dunn, ladies and gentlemen, the second place team owner in the Fantasy Pros Championship, as we bring you a special Wednesday night show of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour here on the FFPC socials. I do want to thank Larry. I want to thank the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you for streaming, watching, downloading, listening, however you're consuming this content. We appreciate you. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour will return at its normal time this Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern time, with our co-host with the most, Ferrell Elliott, and another special guest coming up on that show. High Stakes Lowdown has been busy this week. We had 2 episodes already. The Week 5 Fantasy Pros Championship, 5th place team owner Craig Mastro joined me on Monday night. And then Tuesday night, last night, we had another HSLD with 5-time FFPC league champion Rick Kaufman. There is no High Stakes Lowdown next week because I will be out of town and I can't get a good enough connection to do video. So that's why we did 2 of them this week. In case you missed a bonus episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network or the FFPC socials last night, I had, for the numbers, FTN Fantasies, Nelson Sousa from the Fantasy Empire Player Profiler podcast for 2 full hours. Great stuff from him. A lot of good insight. And you can rewatch that on the FFPC or the BSN socials. Tomorrow, we go live at 7 p.m. for 2 hours again. The Roto Superstar himself, at Roto Superstar on X. It is Brandon Murchison making his return to that show from Roto Baller. That's going to be a fun one, and it'll lead right in to Thursday Night Football between the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. Play the FFPC Weekly Challenge right now. No draft or salary cap. You can play with or without kickers and defenses, and you can play for as little as $35 and win as much as $2,500 at myffpc.com with the weekly challenge. The only restriction, you cannot play two players on the same team. So 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 4 flexes, or a kicker and a defense. You can tack onto that if you want to play that classic format as well. 10, 30, and 100 team contests are available. Go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com to check that out. Remember to like, subscribe, comment on this video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, get notified. Thanks to everybody hanging out on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter watching this tonight, or X, I should say. Great support from you guys. You are the lifeblood that keeps this show going, and we'll have another one for you on Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. For Larry Dunn, I'm Eric Balkman. We'll talk with you on Friday. Your week officially continues now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
I should mention too tonight. I said there's no high stakes lowdown next week. There's also no high stakes fantasy football hour next week as well. So hopefully you get your fill of it tonight and Friday night, and we will resume with this show after Friday in 2 weeks from then. So that's what's going on here. A lot of shows this week. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. I'm enjoying producing it and enjoying talking with all these great fantasy players as well. With that, I bid you adieu. James Hicks, Scott Christian, Oinker says good night. We'll see you again on Friday. Thanks for watching, everybody.